get them there. So up around the Portland area, the storm weakens up there, but as it weakens, it stays here for a longer period of time. That's where we could see a good 1.5 feet of snow.
It's going to be interesting to watch. 2, say the very least, back-to-back-to-back storms. 3 nor'easters in the matter of less than 2 weeks. All right, Dr. Knabb with us again to answer some of your questions tonight, so let's get right to it. And thanks to all of you sending them on Twitter. Mike asking this, should the snow be lighter and fluffier than the last storm that we had in New Hampshire? Let's hope so.
Well, I'll tell you what, New Hampshire is further in on there, back into the colder air. You're going to get significant snowfall there as well. Your temperatures are a few degrees colder in this system, and so your snowfall, snow-to-water ratios may be a little bit lighter. Not as much of a real heavy, wet, dense snow. The problem is those strong winds oftentimes will cause almost like a concrete effect of the snow just piling and really getting dense when it is finally on the ground.
Heavier wet snow closer to the coast.
Closer to the coast.
Okay, thank you for the question. Our next one this evening, and this one comes to us from William asking, I have no school tomorrow. How much snow in Boston and when? Oh, someone's going to try to enjoy it, right?
Well, you know, Rick, it's interesting. In our past storms, we've had this huge snowfall difference across the Boston area. This storm here looks like all of Boston Metro is likely going to get heavy snow. Again, the heaviest during the afternoon hours there with very strong winds. I would not be surprised all these areas will see 1.5 feet of snow. This could be really big.
And what's interesting, though, is that, again, they're not Boston proper, not in the blizzard warning. And north and south of there is where the winds are worse. And to the south of there is where the coastal impacts are worse. So it's going to be a different experience depending on exactly where you are in eastern Massachusetts.
A lot of people, I mean, our most recent storms, Boston by and large has been spared the worst of it. So less of an impact from the ocean this time, less moderating impact from the ocean this time.
Yeah, the direction of the wind is going to dictate that south of Boston is what takes the brunt of the coastal impacts, because like a catcher's mitt, the ball is coming right into southern Massachusetts, being caught by the Cape, and Nantucket's going to get it too.
For the one high tide cycle.
For the one high tide cycle, really bad one, mid to late morning tomorrow.
Mid to late morning, okay.
All right, thank you both. Thank you all for sending in your questions. We'll do it again next hour. If you're on Twitter, send your question and attach the hashtag WUTV. Stick around, we got a lot more coming up. In 60 seconds, we'll head back out to the field to Boston and Massachusetts.
Coming up tonight on Weather Underground, a relentless barrage of nor'easters. First, we had Winter Storm Grayson, an epic blizzard that hammered the south and crushed the northeast with snow and record flooding. Then Winter Storm Riley battered the coast with damaging winds, massive waves, and more than 3 feet of snow. Quickly on its heels was Winter Storm Quinn. That one brought heavy, wet snow and left more than 1 million people in the dark. And now it's Winter Storm Skylar's turn, the third nor'easter to hit in less than 2 weeks. We have everything you need to know next on Weather Underground. And thanks for staying with us as we continue our Weather Underground special coverage of Winter Storm Skylar. You know, last week, if you were watching us, our forecast models were taking this system more off coast. And then over the weekend, a big turnaround, both models honing in on the solution that we are now set on. Another strong nor'easter impacting parts of the New England states, especially areas from Boston all the way up to Maine. Here in the city of Boston, by the way, we're under a snow emergency that began 1 hour ago. So Mayor Marty Walsh has said you need to clear your cars from the roads. You know, if you live in those areas that are affected by that snow emergency, and they're ready to roll once that snow starts falling to have the plows out, and they've got all that salt ready. They are no stranger to nor'easters. Now, things are still moving at Logan. You can hear the roar of one of those aircrafts. They're trying to get people in and out. Tomorrow morning, though, whole different ball game as many of those flights have been canceled out of Logan. We have team coverage, not just here in Boston. That's where I'm located, but we've also got Mike. He's in Islip, New York, telling us about the conditions on Long Island, yet another location that's been hit hard so far this season. Winter weather expert Tom Nizzle ready to break down all aspects. And of course, our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb, he's been monitoring the situation along the coast with the past few storms, and it looks like once again, Winter Storm Skylar could be bringing some effects. Winter Storm Quinn, we just got through with that not even a week ago. That one brought that very heavy, wet snow, and we were seeing the scenes all across the Northeast and New England with power lines down and trees down. There are still people trying to get power back on, and now we're just adding another nor'easter. It's almost like we're throwing it on, just overload for this area. I talked to some people out here earlier today, and the woman just said, I'm done. I quit. I'm ready for spring. And I don't think you can blame her because here in Boston, this is not going to be a little storm either. It looks like Skylar could be perhaps the biggest snowmaker for the city. We had over 5 inches with Quinn, about a half a foot. With Riley, very little, only about a ½ inch for the city of Boston. But then Grayson, that one brought over a foot of snow. Could this one be a little more? We think so. Over 13 inches out of Grayson. Right now the forecast is for around 14 inches here in the city of Boston. Really anywhere from 12 to 18. If we see some overachieving bands of snow, we could be looking at higher totals. So the threat is there. The snow moves in, as far as timing's concerned, during the morning hours. It's going to snow in earnest through the morning and the afternoon, moderate to heavy through most of the daytime hours, and we will see that whole accumulation come during the day on Tuesday. On top of the snow, we will be dealing with the winds gusting 50 to 60 miles an hour at times. So we're going to have much more from Boston, but right now I want to check things out on Long Island. Meteorologist Mike Seidel is there.
Hey, Alex, good evening from Islip. We're in the midpoint of the island from New York City out to Montauk. And out here, we're going to get more snow and more wind than New York City. And it's basically a geographical argument here with this storm. The farther east you go on the island, the more snow you get, the higher the winds will gust, and the longer it will last. With that being said, we're looking at a late morning wrap-up in New York City, noon to 1 here, and maybe an hour or two later out of Montauk. The good thing about the storm for us is it's going to intensify, and it's going to be far enough offshore that we're just going to get brushed in New York City, and a little bit more than brushed in higher impact situation from here out towards Riverhead and also out towards the Hamptons and Montauk. Take you back to Riley and the beaches. Remember this one? Friday, March 2nd. We were in Montauk, but boy, the wind and the waves, we had wind gusts over 60 miles an hour, a lot of beach erosion, and a lot of coastal flooding on the North Shore. This time around, 1 high tide cycle, not 3 or 4, and we have a coastal flood advisory, not a coastal flood warning, up for the North Shore of Long Island. And then we had Quinn last week. This is the one that brought the snow. Certainly parts of New Jersey know about that and the power outages. New York City had over 3, a little over 3 out here. Officially, Islip had 6.9 inches of heavy, wet snow. This is going to be wet snow too, because most of it's going to come down to temperatures, in fact, maybe all of it comes down to temperatures above freezing. New York City timing after midnight tonight until late tomorrow morning. Temperatures in the city, 34, 35. Roadways, pavement, asphalt, forget about it. Grass and car tops, and then it's over with. High later tomorrow, 40 degrees. But again, on the island, notice the totals as you get out here, 5 to 8. Out to Montauk and the Hamptons, 8+. And it winds down later tomorrow afternoon on the far eastern end. So Mike Bettis, Tom Nizzle, Dr. Nab, another nor'easter, but obviously by far the higher impacts and the worst travel will be in southern New England and not here in New York State.
And they might be breathing a big sigh of relief after what just happened to them over the last 2 storms. Mike, thank you very much for that update. Tom Nizzle, our winter weather expert, joining us now, breaking down all the anatomy of this, if you will, Tom, because this is really now starting to bottom out for us here, and it's just going to crank as it goes up the coast.
Yeah, for meteorologists, one picture could be worth 1,000 words. I'm looking at these features right here in the water vapor imagery. This is the big upper level pattern here, and we're beginning to see features here that are really indicative of a rapidly developing, explosively developing low pressure system. There is that low there right now. Winds gusting over 40 miles an hour now along the North Carolina coast, and this baby's only going to deepen as it heads northward. Snow is really beginning to break out in eastern PA. Let's take a look down in through the Virginias now. That snow is crashing right to the coast. That cold air is coming in on the backside of this low now. Norfolk down to 34. This isn't going to last long. You could see a couple of inches in these areas. Visibility is going to go down below a mile. This is where the business is really going to start picking up here. From Allentown right up into southeastern New York State. That is going to increase throughout the rest of the night tonight. Watch this plume of snowfall explode here as we go into the morning rush hour. From New York to Boston, it's going to be rough to start the morning, and then it goes downhill from there. New York now opens up after noontime. This is the area in New England that we keep talking about. Southeastern New England in particular just stays under the gun here for heavy snow right in through tomorrow evening. The system eventually moves its way up into Maine, keeps the snow up there as it weakens, but boy, tomorrow afternoon is going to be tough.
One thing you mentioned was the wind,
Yep.
right? And Dr. Knabb with us tonight to talk about, obviously, big coastal impacts because of it.
Yeah, and tomorrow morning, this coastal flood warning for southeastern Massachusetts, including the Cape and Nantucket, that's in effect from 8 a.m. to noon tomorrow because that's when the high tide is going to occur. Yeah. So we'll show you how the coastal flooding is going to be caused by the storm and the high tide phasing up one bad time tomorrow morning.
Dr. Knabb's going to rejoin us. We're going to break down specifics about the coastal flooding, where the impacts could be highest. Also, when we come back, we're going to break down the highest totals for snow and the travel impacts up and down the coast. Stay with us. Weather Underground will be right back. Well, the seacoast town of Scituate, Massachusetts, is certainly not a stranger to the power of Mother Nature. This winter season has been very harsh, back-to-back-to-back nor'easters, as Winter Storm Skylar now moves in and up the coast as well. You're just looking at the waves and the incredible damage that we have seen there. The Weather Channel's Kelly O'Hara is live in Scituate for us tonight. And Kelly, obviously, you know, for folks that may not be familiar, the big waves crashing on the roofs of homes, that's Scituate. We've seen it several times already this year. No reason to think it won't happen again with Winter Storm Skylar.
Well, we are anticipating a high tide tomorrow morning during this storm. And, you know, earlier we spoke to the Director of Public Works, and they are nervous for this storm. They said that they've been hit a lot by high tides in the last few weeks. They said that they had, with the last storm, 11 astronomical high tides. And the coastline here really took a battering, not only here in Scituate, but other surrounding communities here in this town. The seawall broke. Lots of homes were flooded, and power was out for days. Let me tell you, though, right now it is clear as it can be, but we can see the clouds rolling in and the temperatures are really dropping within the last hour. It's 38, feels like it's 29, but it feels like it's a whole lot colder. Here in Scituate, this is going to be an area where they are going to get battered by another storm. And earlier we caught up with the Director of Public Works, and he says they're trying to be prepared. Take a listen. We will have to get to that a little bit later, but he talked a lot about how tough these seawalls have been battered alongside the shoreline and the preparations that they are doing to them to repair them for these high tides tomorrow, and of course as this storm trickles on. Now this is an area right here south of Boston. We call it the South Shore. They are expected to get at least a foot of snow, maybe even more. The Director of Public Works says his guys have been working around the clock since these last few storms. He says they are tired, and it's not just here, it's everywhere. He says town municipalities are really stretched right now with these storms because they said they don't have backup crews like some of the states do. They said they are going, and they are going to go strong starting first thing tomorrow morning when that snow begins to fall. Of course, we're going to now send it to the Weather Cave in Atlanta, where Dr. Knabb and of course Mike Betts is going to talk a lot more about what's expected.
Kelly, thank you very much for that update. And the thing about this one too, Dr. Knabb, is maybe a little bit different than previous ones is the snow. They get the snow with this one too. As some of the previous ones, they just got rain and big coastal impacts. They get a double whammy this time.
Yeah, how would you like to get a blizzard for several hours, and then in the middle of that blizzard, you get these tremendous coastal impacts? And you might be wondering, why is it that the coastal impacts don't occur throughout the event like the snow and the wind during the blizzard? And it's because you need the high tide to take the ocean over the edge, literally, onto the roads, maybe into the basements. Because the tidal range in Massachusetts is so large that when you're at low tide, it kind of protects you from the water rise. But when you get to high tide, it's the other way around.
Different story. All right, the low works its way up the coastline here. We talk about the benchmark a lot, which if a storm center passes over that, you can really kind of maximize the impacts and especially some snow too. But the wind is full force.
Yes, and it's going to be strong enough and large enough by tomorrow morning that if we were at high tide early tomorrow morning, we could start to see some coastal impacts. But this is low tide tomorrow morning. Even though the blizzard is starting, the coastal flooding isn't really yet. But then we get to another high tide mid to late tomorrow morning. Then you got that strong east to northeasterly flow into eastern Massachusetts. When you phase the storm surge and the high tide, that's when the coastal flooding can occur. And just a quick look at it, there's the nasty high tide. And here comes the surge from the storm. When you phase them together, you can get 2 to 2.5, maybe even 3 feet above normally dry ground. Gets onto roads, into basements.
Our forecast has actually gone up a little bit.
It has.
For water here. Dr. Knabb, thank you very much. Coastal Massachusetts, be aware of this one. Could have similar impacts to previous nor'easters over the last month or so. When we come back, we're talking about major travel impacts at the airports and on the roadways. We'll break it down city by city for you. Snow just blanketing cities across the Appalachian Spine tonight. Check out the town of Christiansburg, Virginia, 35 miles south of Roanoke. Breezy conditions adding to the potential danger there. But how about the snow? Big time snow falling for you today, and we can see some refreeze overnight tonight. So any of the snow that maybe melted, made the roads a little wet tonight, could be really slick and icy come tomorrow morning. We know that Winter Storm Skylar is going to have some pretty significant impact to travel as it rolls its way through the Northeast. So let's take you on I-95. We'll go from New York into Boston, then on our way to Portland. For a place like New York, lower end of the snow for you here, 1 to 3 inches coming your way, but snow morning to early afternoon. Your morning drive most likely to be impacted here. Then we take you up into Boston, morning and evening snow for you. Snowfall rates could be 1, 2, 3 inches an hour. 1 foot to 1.5 feet is coming your way, then very gusty winds on top of that. Visibility is going to be a huge issue for us here. And then snow heavy at times in Portland, Maine. Travel's not advised at all here. And at least 1 foot of snow is coming for us here as we travel I-95 farther north and up into New England. So obviously big impacts happening for us here on the roadways tomorrow. We're going to have some impacts at the airports as well. That begins tonight, by the way, and more than 1,200 flights have already been canceled out of the Northeast. So big impacts in particular out of Boston. So here are impacts tonight: Pittsburgh, Philly, LaGuardia, and Boston. Highest impact for those airports. Then tomorrow it's Buffalo, LaGuardia, Boston, as well as Burlington. But we could also see impacts and delays a little bit farther south as well. Let's roll it into Wednesday. Storm's gone at this point for a place like Boston, LaGuardia, down through D.C. However, there could be a lag effect as everyone who got their flight canceled tomorrow now tries to get on a flight on Wednesday. We could have some backups. But notice this. How about our cancellations already? More than 1,300 cancellations nationwide. Most of those are out of Boston, where we've canceled 827 flights. Could you imagine that many flights being canceled? We know there are going to be impacts Boston, New York, even a place like Providence. The Weather Channel's Justin Michaels is there this evening. Justin, we just showed the maps. They're ugly when it comes to travel, and Providence will be right in the heart of the heavy snow and the wind, too.
Oh, yeah, I'll tell you what, not a good thing. In fact, the winter storm warning starts tonight at 11 o'clock here in Providence, goes until 8 o'clock Tuesday night. That's a huge block of time that this storm is going to be rolling through here. The snow may be expected to start around midnight tonight, and in anticipation of that, the state has closed all offices tomorrow. School districts are closed, including right here in Providence. The city has limited staffing tomorrow, and right now, state police in Rhode Island are saying, don't go on the roads. Stay off the roads. You're going to go home tonight, stay home. Give the crews time to work, give them space to work, and unless you absolutely need to go out for a health emergency or something like that, if you don't need to be on the roads, you really should be staying home, because we're talking what could be 1 to 3 inch per hour snow rates and even blizzard-like conditions. Yes, the National Weather Service is using that nasty B word here in Providence as well, because it is certainly a possibility. As far as snow totals, when this thing is all said and done sometime tomorrow night, we're talking it could be 18 inches of snow here in Providence. So a very dangerous storm, a very impactful storm. The third nor'easter, of course, we've all been talking about that in the last 2 weeks. People here in Providence, like people everywhere else in New England and across the Northeast, of course, are simply done, waiting for spring. We're getting so much closer. And I know, Mike, I know you're excited about that. I'm excited about it. All the people who are at that bus stop are excited about it, as this city right now at this point is like a ghost town. Mike, into you.
My goodness, here it comes. Just hold your breath, right? Justin, thank you very much for that. Let's go ahead and update you on what's going on here. Blizzard warnings, winter storm warnings in effect across a good chunk here of New England. The blizzard warnings right along coastal Massachusetts. Look at this huge amount of snow. Some places we'll see as much as 2 feet of snow. For Hartford, tonight through tomorrow, 8 to 12 inches, wind gusts as high as 35 miles per hour. Take a look at the timing here. 2 a.m. tonight through about 6 p.m. tomorrow, so it's Evening commute, a morning commute and evening commute. There's a look at the forecast. Significantly more snow closer to the low, northerly wind here. You're farther away from the moisture the farther interior you go. So a foot out on the coast, but maybe 3-4 inches the farther interior you go. Portland, Maine, we're going to get absolutely crushed. A foot to a foot and a half of snow. And notice how it forms for us here in Maine. Big snows roll in later tonight through the day tomorrow. The state absolutely walloped. Some places could see in hot spots 2 feet of snow. We're back with our team coverage right after this on Weather Underground.
So here we go. Another March snowstorm, another March nor'easter on the way.
The ice skating rink here at Bryant Park is going away, while another nor'easter is headed in our direction.
And this is the reason why they closed schools. They've delayed a lot of businesses, even the city government, from opening, because they are expecting some heavier bursts of snow.
Everyone gearing up for Skylar, their newest winter storm, to pack quite a punch once again into parts of the Northeast, especially the New England states. I'm meteorologist Alex Wilson, live here in Boston, where we could technically be looking at our biggest snow of the year. Back in the early part of the year, in fact, just after the new year, Winter Storm Grayson brought 13.4 inches of snow to the area. We're in the 10 to 15 range for this one. We had Riley, which only brought about a ½ inch of snow. And then we saw 6.4 inches out of Winter Storm Quinn. So could we bookend our year of nor'easters, as it seemed, with 2 big storms? It looks like Skylar has that potential. And with 10 to 15 inches again in the forecast, not out of the question that we see our biggest snow thus far for the season. I want to get you caught up on what we know right now about Winter Storm Skylar. New York has issued a travel advisory. This runs until noon tomorrow. Frontier and Southwest, they've canceled their flights to Long Island's MacArthur Airport, and schools have closed in Boston and also in Providence, Rhode Island. Here in Boston, it's all about preparation once again, although at this point I think it's basically just instinct. They know what they're doing. They've done it already so many times. Again, we had Grayson back at the start of the year. Then just within the past 2 weeks, we've had Winter Storm Riley and Winter Storm Quinn. So the Department of Transportation, again, they're preparing, and here's what they had to say.
This is a storm to be taken seriously, no matter where you live in Massachusetts. There will be times tomorrow when it will be hazardous to be driving and possibly even to be outside. So think about your plans for Tuesday, and if at all possible, your plan should be to remain inside and off the roads so that those folks who really do need to travel to get.
Very good advice. You know, Boston Mayor Marty Walsh said let the streets stay as clear as possible so the plows can do their work, so emergency vehicles can get through. And again, those essential employees, people who work at hospitals, so they can get into work. Schools are closed, so we're not going to have the buses, any of the students out there tomorrow, at least not in vehicles. They may be out there on foot enjoying it. But the weather, it's going to really be tough out here for times, because as the snow starts during the early morning hours, it immediately ramps up in intensity. So we're looking at moderate to heavy snowfall through most of the daytime hours tomorrow, the entire morning as well as the afternoon, before snow eventually begins to wind down around 10 o'clock. Again, by that time, we could be looking at double-digit snowfall here in the city of Boston. A winter storm warning in effect for the city. Blizzard warnings, though, in effect in surrounding areas of coastal Massachusetts. Let's see what's happening out on Long Island. That's where we find Mike Seidel.
Hi, Alex. We've had a few raindrops out here. Our temperature right now 40. Now, the issue here is not what's going up on in the clouds. It's plenty cold aloft. It's going to stay cold enough aloft for snow. It's all about the ground temperatures, or the surface temperatures, not so much theoretically the ground. While the road surfaces are warm, it was back in the 40s today. So what we're going to be watching tomorrow after sunrise is the March sun angle, temperatures above freezing, and the snowfall. So all those together in New York City, it's not going to be a major issue because it's going to melt literally on contact. We've just updated our snowfall forecast for New York City to 1 inch from 1 to 3. So again, more of a nuisance in the city for those of you getting around. Airport's a little bit different story. LaGuardia now has canceled 83 departures. That is 14% of their tally for tomorrow, 14% of the departures. Kennedy and Newark, 3 to 5% of their outbounds have been canceled. So not many flights so far compared to Logan, where hundreds of flights have been canceled, about 90% of all departures. And we'll show you what it looked like for Grayson in New York City, and it's nothing like this. It's not going to look anything like this tomorrow. This is back on January 4th. The snow and the wind. We have blizzard conditions across many parts, or near blizzard conditions, many parts of southern New England and the Northeast. But here tomorrow, it's going to be a whole different story. Out here in the island, we're looking for about 3 inches here in Islip. That's down a little bit. The eastern end of Long Island, we're talking about upwards of 6 to 8 inches, Montauk and the Hamptons and Riverhead. But again, heavy wet snow. The timing, it wraps up in New York City late morning. Out here probably by noon or 1 o'clock. So that's really going to help out the flight situation and getting to and getting back from work for the PM rush hour. And Mike Bettis, so far, few if any school cancellations. I did see Nassau Community College is canceled for tomorrow, but I think all school districts are just going to take a wait and see on the situation in the morning, because unlike Boston and Providence, this is going to be a piece of cake getting around in versus what they're going to have to deal with in Southeast Mass tomorrow all day long.
Yeah, comparatively speaking, it might be a cakewalk in that regard. Mike, thank you very much for that update. Let's keep you updated on what's happening with Winter Storm Skylar right now. Really putting down the snow here through North Carolina and Virginia. Some pretty intense snowfall rates here, and the snow now starting on the back of that. By the way, we'll get some lake effect with the general wind trajectory out of the north and then turning northwest here. Look at that strong punch of upper level winds here. South side of that low embedded in the base of that trough, with the low sitting right in the center of that trough. So we're pulling down in some cold air. We're going to get some influence here off the Atlantic. We're going to throw back moisture into that cold air, and that of course means we're going to end up getting some snow. And then as this low deepens and we bottom out that pressure, the winds go up. So they work in inverse proportion here. So it gets really windy, in particular along the coastline here. And we think for that reason that power outages are likely. That will include coastal Maine down through coastal New Hampshire and then down through Massachusetts as well. The area that's highlighted in pink, possible power outages here. This map, the last storm went all the way back into New York, by the way. So this low's a little bit farther off the coast. We think the wind's impacts are just at the coast. Thank goodness. Let's bring in our experts, though, to talk a little bit more about this. Tom Nizzle, Rick Knapp with us tonight. Wind-driven snow,
yep.
One thing that we'll talk about. Wind-driven water, the other thing we'll talk about. Both could be very impactful depending on where you are.
Yeah, this is an explosively developing nor'easter. The central pressure is going to reach bomb criteria, probably dropping 25 to 30 millibars in a 24-hour period. The features, the dynamics going on in the atmosphere are going to be such that it's going to produce narrow bands of very heavy snowfall, but on a larger scale, a broad footprint of strong winds, and on the coastal areas, that's going to result in some significant issues as well.
Yeah, some folks where they are, they're going to get all of it. The coastal flooding, the blizzard conditions, the strong winds blowing the snow and the ocean around at the same time. The visuals tomorrow morning, mid to late morning on East Coast Massachusetts, could be something we haven't seen in any of the previous storms.
Could you imagine, and there'll be people out there that are literally be in waist-deep water and it's pouring snow on them.
Oh gosh, that water's got to be
whiteout
cold.
conditions, ice water.
Yeah,
right?
why would you want to be out there?
Could
But
you
the water,
imagine?
you're right, the water could be on the roads and in the basements.
Someone will be out there trying to unplug a drain, a storm drain or something, trying to get the water to go out, but it's going to be awful.
It's going to be very rough, and you can see this intense. It's going to be wrapped up like a coiled spring. That huge footprint of snow just explodes here as we get into the morning rush hour. Boston and New York. Now this system really is impacting the area in the afternoon. Very strong winds and very heavy snowfall in Boston right during that afternoon time frame through the evening rush hour. The system moves rapidly northward here and then begins to slow down and weaken, but that's an extended period of more moderate snow across the state of Maine. They get their heavy snowfall just because of the length of time. Huge impacts here. Morning rush hour through evening rush hour. This is the snowfall rates, about a 6-hour period of very heavy snow with sustained winds at 35. Wind gusts 50 to 60 miles an hour across the area. There are the snowfall totals along the Cape. And boy, it's going to be interesting, is it not, Rick?
Yeah, and you notice the timing of the snow in Boston. It's from early morning tomorrow till late late tomorrow night.
Right.
So why aren't the coastal flooding impacts going to be happening throughout that entire time? It's because you have to not only have the storm, but you have to have the high tide. It has to phase together because the tidal range is so great that at low tide, the storm can't produce that kind of flooding. Yeah. Tonight's high tide, the storm isn't close enough. Then tomorrow morning's low tide, the storm's there, but the tide isn't high until we get to late morning. Then you have the onshore push. That's when you're going to get the strong possibility of coastal flooding with the waves getting onto the roads and into the basements. And the winds are really going to be blowing at the time of high tide. Out of the northeast, that catcher's mitt in Massachusetts is going to really capture all that water. And Nantucket's going to get it too. Wow.
It just kind of gives me the cold sweats right now just thinking about some of these cities that are so vulnerable.
Yeah, At least it's not hanging around like Riley did, though. It's going to be in and out
moving
faster
fast.
than that.
But this is what gives New England that reputation. It's these nor'easters that really, really impact that area.
They're hardy folks. There's no question about that, Alex. The reputation I'm sure they're proud of, but man, it's testing them this winter.
Yeah, and obviously that's why you guys sent me. I'm also hardy, and I can handle stuff like this. The year of the nor'easter, that's what it seemed to be. We're going to break it down in the lab, storm by storm, next. I'm meteorologist Alex Wilson here in Boston, Massachusetts, where it has been quite a year as far as the nor'easters are concerned. We started things off with Winter Storm Grayson, bringing 13.6 inches of snow to the city, or rather 0.4 inches of snow to the city. Then we had Riley, not much snow, just about a half inch out of that one. Then last week, Quinn brought over 6 inches, 6.4 inches. Tom Nizzle and Mike Bettis are in the lab to break down what has been a very stormy year so far and the track of each one of these systems.
You know, absolutely amazing, Alex, when you think about that. 4 really potent nor'easters so far this season. So Tom's here at the chalkboard, going to break down these northeast snowstorms. Each one had a different personality.
Yeah, they all end up in the same place, but they form in different areas.